Okay, so welcome back to the second developer log for Rifter, which is my final major project, or my 3D game in this case. And I'm going to be modeling some environmental props, such as pallets, crates, barrels. I think I do a lamppost somewhere in there. I do scaffolding for like the sides of buildings. I think I do a wheelbarrow, or a cart, as it's referred to. And I'm using the bevel options here to sort of bevel the edges of my meshes here. It's planks of wood for a cart, and it looks pretty good. I think I sort of mess around with it and I change the sort of width of the bevel, and I also add some wheels with some like copper lining on the wheels. That's some foresight for you. But yeah, I think I've recorded about 7 more of these, which show all my development for the game, and I think I've even got into some programming along the way. But as for the props, I'm really pleased with them. Like the ones in the background, I think they look pretty cool. I haven't actually put this together at all in a scene yet, which is what I'm excited to do. It's kind of the last thing, and it's probably the easiest thing to do, because all it is object placement. I guess it's difficult because you have to think about where the player is going to be walking, the flow of the level, the flow of the environment. But for me, it's a lot easier than modeling, because modeling, it's a very time-consuming thing. Because I think I've modeled over 150 props in the latest scene, and I've got houses too and buildings, big buildings, like they're like twice the size of some of the later buildings you'll see. I model a bar or a pub in the video after this one, I do believe. And I've also got tons of Photoshop work, which is interesting for me because I don't really work with Photoshop that much, but I've worked with some banners and posters for the sides of buildings, because I think a common sort of idea that a lot of game developers have, or big companies at least, there's a game called Bioshock Infinite, which is probably one of the most common well-known games of today, really. It's sort of a AAA game in terms of its title, but it's a game like Dishonored where you have advertisement and propaganda throughout the city, and I wanted that to be a common thing in my game. So you can see like advertisement for cigars or beer or whiskey. I thought that'd be quite a cool little concept to play around with, and it brings more life to the scene and environment. You don't want to leave the player sort of feeling lackluster and not really into the immersion of the environment. So here obviously I delete all the planks. As I said earlier, I think I changed the bevel options. I don't even think I bevel it in the end. I think I just leave it how it is, and flat, because it's sort of a rickety kind of feel to it. Or that's what I'm attempting to do anyway. You'll notice that what I do a lot is just select faces and vertices and sometimes edges and just scale things and move things. It's not really at all complex in the sort of beginning, but when I get into the modeling of the buildings, I got to think about modular, like a modular building set, which essentially it allows you to snap pieces together. It's a bit like Lego, only in a 3D modeling space. So you have parts of your building. You have your doorway. You have, let's say, you have your wall 1, which has got a trim around it. Let's say you have a corner wall or a top wall, which is for the top of the building, and maybe if you have an interior, that's even harder because you've got. I don't think any interiors are very modular unless you're doing interior cells. But for me, I'm doing everything in the same cell space. So if there's buildings you can go into, you can literally just walk through the door and it's into the same building, and you're in the same cell. So you don't transfer from the city into another scene in the actual engine itself, the game engine. But more importantly, yeah, I do modular buildings, which is really fun for me because I can see sort of what I can experiment with, and I can put like banners on it, and I can think about where the props are going to be placed as well, in accordation to the sort of size of the buildings. And when I first started doing the modular building, I built a building and it just felt so small in comparison to the player. And I literally mean, you know, it looked like they were about 3 feet tall, or rather the building was too tall. So later on, you'll see, in my later recordings, I've got an like a really big sense of scale. Like the buildings are like 8 stories high, but it feels good. I think I've recorded the latest one. I hope I have, because that's sort of the best one. The later recordings. At least I show like an hour long video of me building an inn, and I'm gonna have the time lapse that because it's just so much. I think it's like 1 hour 45 minutes altogether, and that's way too long for just one video, I feel. So I'll time lapse it so it's about 30 minutes long or something. So then it's easier to watch and consume, I guess. Here I'm modeling the wheels, which are just pipe primitive shapes, and I changed the subdivisions there on the right. And subdivisions are quite helpful because you can sort of increase or decrease the shape of the geometry, so you can make it look more blocky or more smooth. In this case, I wanted to make it look a bit more like a wheel, so a bit smoother, but at the same time not too smooth because we're not in the 21st century. I'm just selecting the interior faces here of this kind of wheel, and I'm going to extrude them inwards to create a wheel shape, or at least attempt to. And I do mess this up a few times and change my mind and how many spaces there's going to be in between each I guess you could say like strut. And I create 2 of these. I duplicate it and put it on the other side as well, and I also do the texturing and the faces on the exterior of the wheel. They're like copper, or I think they're brass in the end. Actually no, I think they're copper, definitely copper. This is of course very basic modeling, so there's not much I can really outline in terms of what tools I'm using. I'm just sort of applying textures and extruding faces, and sometimes I use the smooth tool, and sometimes I use the bevel tool. Now Maya is an incredibly powerful program, so I think I do show some of the development for a character. In fact, I'm certain I do. I show the character modeling. Just to get a basic concept of what I would do if there was animated characters in the game, which is the next big step, I'd say. And I also show some cloth physics, and I think I already have actually. And in the background you'll see frequently there's like cloth hanging over these. I went into the shot there of the kind of pallets and crates and barrels and the props. I just think this adds like a different sort of level of detail. And without it, it just looks kind of, I guess, dull. And for me, it just looks cool. I just thought it was a cool little feature to add a cloth over things like rags, you know. And it's got quite a nice smoothed effect. So, yeah. So here I added the wheels of the cart, which looked pretty good. I add like a handle at the back. Or no, I add 2 more wheels, like a pole to connect to how a cart would actually be. I am using reference images, but there's not really any way I can show them on the screen because I don't actually remember what I looked at. This is kind of just a run and gun, let's see what I could produce on my own without any concept artists backing me, or at least I don't have an artist to work with on this one. I would love to, but it's just so much hassle, and I'm not allowed because it's my final original project, and it's I don't think working with somebody else is permitted because it's meant to be an independent project. I think what I struggle with most is the texturing, because if you don't really have a texture artist, there's no real site you can just be like, okay, these are all my textures and they fit together. So I've tried to alter them in some areas. You'll see in the Photoshop developer logs, me doing that. I think overall, I'm pretty happy with the way this has turned out, because I'm actually recording this post commentary, as you know. So I've modelled, this whole scene is full of props at the moment. It's got, as I said, scaffolding, ladders, like lamp posts, and even buildings and cranes. I've got these cranes, these steampunk kind of rickety Victorian cranes that are basic looking. They're very cool. And I've also got I think I've got fences. I've got all sorts of things. I've got like piles of gears and cogs. Not really sure about those actually, because they don't really suit. They do suit the environment, but I think I'd use them in sort of an industrial area. So if I was going to build like a factory zone, I'd put them in there and the like. So when it comes to the props, it's looking pretty good. The buildings, not so much. I think I've got 8 buildings in total, but they're massive, and you can sort of take them apart and put them together. And I mean, 8 buildings. That's like 4 either side of the player, plus the inn or the bar, which I'm probably not going to use, which is disappointing. But then again, it does show my development, because the building, just in comparison to the new ones, is so small. It just doesn't look right in the environment. But I plan on building at least 10 more buildings, which is a hell of a task I've assigned myself, but it's how the world works, I guess, because I want to get a good grade. So if I don't, I should be very disappointed with myself, if anything, because I love making games. That's my heart's calling, is making games. I guess you could say my heart's calling is actually modeling, doing 3D modeling, but I'd say it's also making games. Like, I did 3D modeling before I even knew how to make games. Like, I didn't even know what a game engine was at the time. Bit backstory for me, I was only like 13 when I started doing modeling, or 12 I think, which is extremely young. At least in my personal experience, I haven't met anyone. I've not met anyone who does 3D modeling, or at least met them and they had been doing it before the college course. That's astonishing to me. But then again, there's people who are really good artists, or really good web developers, or designers in other areas. But modeling seems to be I guess you could say, the black sheep among us. We're not allowed to. There's not many of us. There probably is in other countries. Like, I know they probably teach it in engineering, or like computer science courses around the world. And I know there's a school in Singapore that does concept art. That's pretty cool. There's a guy who runs it, and he bought his own building, and he's got his own. It's for like people who are really good at the concept art side of games. But 3D modeling, I'm not sure. I know there's Digital Tutors, which is an online platform which allows you to learn through others, I guess, like a tutorial system, which is brilliant. I used that for, I'd say, about a couple of months to get to grips with the basics, which is probably the most awful thing I've done, because it wasn't the basics at all. It was advanced stuff, which in hindsight was pretty bad for my learning curve, but I guess it's ironed out over the years, and I sort of learned to learn by myself rather than through others, which is always good. So here I'm just applying more textures to the model, and this car is looking pretty good, and I just combine the mesh, and I think I get on to modeling something else. I can't remember what that is, because this is a long time ago I did this. Pretty sure it's the cogs, and the piles of wood and planks and all the rubbish. Oh, I'm not moving. So just thinking, I think. So I think that's pretty much the end of this developer log. By the looks of it, it's only 18 minutes long, and we're on about 17 minutes or 16 and a half. I think it's pretty good. It's very basic, and I wanna do the next developer log next, because it's got a lot more advanced work in it, and it's much longer, and it's much cooler to look at. But I thought I'd share my basic development as well as my advanced development, because I'd say they're equally as important. And I don't want to have to screen grab every single movement I'm doing, because it would take just hours. And this doesn't take hours. This just takes however long I'm modeling the mesh for. So I think that's looking pretty good. I think in the end I used this for a template for putting things in the cart. So I put like planks of wood and cogs, and I also put fan blades, which is pretty cool. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this developer log. This is the second one. And in the next one, we're going to be looking at buildings, and probably the bar that I model. If not, it'll be the larger buildings or some Photoshop work.